The blood oath was breaking.
My king,
Right there in the
she's
Grand
not
Hall
worthy
of
to be
Wangari
crowned.
territory. Alpha Wairmu held the ceremonial crown above Luna Aroha's head while their son, the heir to the throne, stood frozen at the base of the dais, his small hands trembling with something that looked like betrayal. The Pack law demanded this coronation. The royal decree had been signed in silver ink 3 moons ago. But the child's eyes weren't on his mother. They were locked on the Omega servant girl standing in the shadows, the one with the forbidden bloodline no one was supposed to acknowledge. If you're feeling that twist in your chest right now, you're exactly where you need to be. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break you open. Little Tāmati was only 7 winters old, but he'd inherited his father's gift, the ability to sense true bonds, the connections that ran deeper than pack politics or arranged pairings. And what he sensed between his father and that Omega girl, Kiri, wasn't supposed to exist. According to pack law, Omegas couldn't bond with Alphas who already had chosen Lunas. It violated the ancient codes. It threatened the hierarchy. But biology didn't care about laws, and fate certainly didn't consult council members before weaving invisible threads between souls. Wairmu's hands shook as he held the crown. He'd been Alpha of the South Island territories for 12 years. He'd led his pack through 2 wars with the northern clans. He'd signed treaties in his own blood. But right now, facing his son's knowing stare, he felt like a coward. Because Aroha wasn't his true mate. She was his political alliance. The daughter of the High Council's chairman, Rengi. Their marriage had united the coastal and mountain packs. Their son was supposed to cement that unity for generations. The crown was made of Wakatapu silver and embedded with greenstone from the sacred rivers. It had crowned 23 lunas before Aroha. It was supposed to represent eternal commitment, unbreakable bonds, the permanence of the Alpha-Luna connection. Tāmati took 1 step forward. Then another. The entire pack assembly held their breath. 300 wolves, all dressed in ceremonial furs and traditional weaving, all watching this child who shouldn't have the courage to interrupt his mother's crowning. "Papa," Tāmati said, his voice carrying through the hall with unnatural clarity. "You're making a mistake." Aroha's face went white, then red, then something harder than stone. She'd known. Of course she'd known. You couldn't share a bed with someone for 13 years and not feel the absence of a true bond, the hollow space where soul-deep connection should live. But she'd convinced herself that duty was enough, that respect could replace passion, that pack stability mattered more than personal happiness. She'd been lying to herself. Wairmu lowered the crown an inch. Just an inch. But everyone saw it. "Tāmati," Aroha said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Return to your place. This is not a child's concern. It's my future," Tāmati said. He turned to face the assembly, his small body radiating authority that shouldn't have belonged to someone who hadn't even had his first shift yet. "I'm the heir to the throne. I'm supposed to inherit the alpha position when Papa steps down. But how can I lead with honor if the foundation is built on lies?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. You didn't question the alpha's choices. You especially didn't do it during a sacred ceremony. And you absolutely didn't do it as a child in front of the entire pack hierarchy. But Tāmati wasn't finished. He walked to the edge of the dais, where Kiri stood pressed against the wall, her omega scent carefully suppressed, her eyes downcast as protocol demanded. She was 22, barely considered an adult in pack terms. Her bloodline was forbidden because her great-grandmother had been a northern wolf who'd betrayed her pack during the border wars. Omegas with traitor ancestry weren't allowed to hold positions of honor. They served in the shadows. They kept their heads down. They certainly didn't attract the attention of the ruling alpha. Except Wairmu hadn't chosen to notice Kiri. The bond had chosen for him. 3 years ago, when she'd been brought to the main house as a kitchen servant, their eyes had met across the morning room. And something had clicked into place, an ancient recognition that predated conscious thought, that bypassed every law and tradition and sensible objection. They'd both tried to ignore it. Wiremu had thrown himself into his responsibilities, taking on extra patrols, volunteering for diplomatic missions, anything to stay away from the main house. Kiri had requested transfers to different territories. But fate was patient and persistent. Every attempt to separate only made the bond pull tighter, until the pain of denial became worse than the risk of acknowledgement. 2 months ago, during the new moon hunt, they'd both shifted in the same forest grove. Their wolves had touched. Not mated. Wiremu had that much control, but touched. Acknowledged. Seen each other. Tāmati had been there. He'd watched through 7-year-old eyes as his father's wolf, massive and silver-furred, had pressed his muzzle against the small russet omega wolf with heartbreaking tenderness. He'd watched them circle each other in the moonlight, a dance of longing and restraint, want and duty. He'd understood then what the adults were trying to hide from themselves. Now, Tāmati held out his hand to Kiri. "Come here," he said gently. She shook her head, terror bright in her dark eyes. Omegas didn't step onto the sacred dais. It was forbidden, punishable by exile or death, depending on the offense. "I command you," Tāmati said, and there was alpha force behind the words, the kind of authority that came from something deeper than age or position. "As heir to this pack, I command you to step forward." Kiri's body moved before her mind could catch up. The alpha command yanked her forward like a rope around her chest. She stumbled onto the first step of the dais, then the second, then the third, until she stood beside the child, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Tāmati, stop this." Aroha's voice cracked like a whip. "You will sit down. You will be silent. Or I will have you removed." "Try it," Tāmati said calmly. "Call the guards. Let them put their hands on the future alpha. Let the pack see you silence your own son because he's telling the truth you won't admit." The threat hung in the air like smoke. The guards stationed around the hall didn't move. They were loyal to Wiremu, not Aroha. And attacking the heir, even at the Luna's command, would be treason. Wiremu finally found his voice. "Son, please. You don't understand the complexities." "I understand Papa is dying inside," Tāmati interrupted. "I understand Mama is angry all the time because she knows she's not your real mate. I understand Kiri cries in the pantry when she thinks no one can hear. And I understand that when I'm alpha, I won't make people live like this. I won't choose politics over truth." The assembly erupted into whispers. Accusations. Because the child had just confirmed what everyone had suspected but no one had dared voice. The Alpha and Luna were not true mates. Their bond was artificial. Their marriage was a contract, not a calling. High Council Chairman Rengi stood from his seat in the front row, his face purple with rage. "This is treason," he boomed. "The child speaks heresy. Alpha Wiremu, control your heir or I will invoke council intervention under Pack Law Statute 47. Statute 47 allowed the High Council to remove an alpha from power if his household was deemed unstable, if his leadership was compromised, if his personal choices threatened pack cohesion. They'd been waiting for this. The council members who resented Wiremu's reforms, who hated his progressive policies about Omega rights and bloodline restrictions. They'd been searching for an excuse to challenge him, and now his own son had handed them the perfect weapon. Wiremu looked at the crown in his hands, then at Aroha, whose eyes were bright with tears and fury, then at Kiri, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm, then at his son, who stood there with heartbreaking certainty in his young face. "What would you have me do?" Wiremu asked quietly. "Not as an alpha, as a father." Tāmati reached up and took the crown from his father's hands. It was heavy, meant for adult heads not children, but he held it steady. "I would have you stop lying," Tāmati said. He turned to his mother. "Mama, I love you. But you don't love Papa. Not the way mates should. You love being Luna. You love the power and the position. But if you were honest, you'd admit you've never felt the soul bond stories talk about." Aroha's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "How dare you? Am I wrong?" Tāmati asked simply. The silence was devastating. Your mother has been a faithful Luna, Wyrmu said firmly. She has served this pack with grace and strength. She has never betrayed. Neither have you, Tāmati said. You've both done your duty. You've both sacrificed your happiness for pack stability. But I'm the next generation, Papa. And I won't inherit a throne built on misery. He looked at Kiri. The bond between you and Papa, that's real. That's what pack bonds are supposed to feel like. Can sense it. Everyone with true sight can sense it. And if we pretend it doesn't exist, we're teaching the pack that politics matter more than truth. Pack law explicitly forbids. Chairman Rengi started. Pack law was written by people protecting their own power, Tāmati said, turning to face the council members. By people who wanted to control who could bond with whom based on bloodlines and social position. But bonds aren't political. They're sacred. And if our laws contradict sacred truth, then our laws are wrong. The grand hall descended into chaos. Half the assembly shouted support for the child's courage. The other half screamed about tradition and order and the collapse of pack structure. Guards moved forward, then stopped, uncertain who to obey. Council members stood, gesturing wildly, demanding order, demanding the Alpha take control, demanding consequences. Through it all, Tāmati stood on the dais, holding the crown that was too heavy for his small hands, looking at the Omega girl his father was forbidden to love. Then he did something that would be talked about in pack histories for generations. He turned away from his mother, walked to Kiri, and raised the crown toward her head. No! Aroha lunged forward, but Wyrmu caught her arm. Not roughly but firmly. Wait, Wyrmu said hoarsely. Let him finish. He's placing the crown on an Omega, Aroha hissed. On a forbidden bloodline. On a servant. He's making a mockery of everything. He's making a statement, Wyrmu said. Watch. Tāmati stood on his toes, but he still couldn't reach Kiri's head. She was frozen, tears streaming down her face, her entire body locked in terror and disbelief. The crown hovered in the air between them, this symbol of ultimate pack authority, held by a child who wanted to give it to the one person who could never, ever receive it. Kneel, Tāmati said softly to Kiri. Please. I can't, she whispered. They'll kill me. They'll exile your father. They'll see the truth, Tāmati said. That bonds don't care about bloodlines. That love doesn't follow laws. That the next generation won't repeat the mistakes of the past. He looked at his father. Papa taught me that alphas serve their packs, not rule them. That leadership means protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them. But how can I believe those lessons if he won't protect his own mate? Wyrmu's knees nearly buckled. Because his 7-year-old son had just articulated what he'd been too afraid to admit for 3 years. Kiri wasn't just an attraction. Wasn't just a forbidden desire. She was his mate. The other half of his soul. The one the moon goddess had chosen for him before he was even born. And he'd been preparing to crown someone else. The council will never accept this, Chairman Rengi said. His voice deadly quiet. If you proceed, Alpha Wyrmu, we will invoke immediate removal. You will lose your territory, your title. Your son will lose his inheritance. Is that what you want? To throw away everything for an Omega who doesn't even have legal standing? It was the ultimatum. The line in the sand. Choose the bond or choose the throne. Choose truth or choose power. Choose love or choose duty. The entire pack waited. Wyrmu walked slowly to his son's side. He took the crown from Tāmati's small hands, feeling its weight in a way he never had before. All those generations of Lunas who'd worn it. All those bonds that were supposed to be eternal. How many of them had been real? How many had been political arrangements disguised as fate? Kiri, Wyrmu said gently. Look at me. She raised her eyes, those beautiful dark eyes that haunted his dreams, and he saw everything he'd been denying reflected back at him. The bond. The recognition. The impossible, terrifying, beautiful truth that they were meant for each other despite every law and tradition that said otherwise. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have claimed you the first day we met. I should have told the council to void my contract with Aroha. I should have fought for us instead of hiding. I was a coward. But my son is braver than me, and he's showing me what real leadership looks like." He held out his hand. After a long, trembling moment, Kiri took it. The bond snapped into full consciousness the instant their skin touched, no longer suppressed or denied. A golden thread of connection visible to everyone with the sight, wrapping around them both, pulling tight, marking them as true mates in a way that couldn't be faked or forged. Aroha made a sound like she'd been stabbed. Because it was one thing to suspect. It was another to see the bond manifest in front of 300 witnesses, to watch that golden light that should have been hers shining around another woman. "You've destroyed us," she said flatly. "Both of us. Our son. Pack. Everything." "No," Tāmati said. "We're rebuilding it. Better this time. Honest this time." Wairmu lifted the crown again. Not over Aroha's head. Over Kiri's. "This will start a war," Chairman Rengi said. "The Northern Territories will claim your leadership is compromised. The Council will remove you by force if necessary. And the pack will split between those who support tradition and those who support this insanity. Then we fight," Wairmu said simply. "But we fight for truth, not for comfortable lies." He lowered the crown onto Kiri's head. The grand hall exploded. Guards moved forward, unsure whether to protect or attack. Council members rushed the dais, shouting about violations and consequences. Pack members surged toward the front, some cheering, some screaming condemnation. Aroha collapsed to her knees, her carefully controlled composure finally shattering into raw grief. And through it all, Wairmu stood with his true mate, his son between them, holding their ground against the chaos they'd unleashed. The crown sat on Kiri's head at a crooked angle. She wasn't supposed to wear it. Omega's heads weren't shaped for crowns. Their necks weren't strong enough to carry the weight of authority. At least, that's what the old laws claimed. But Kiri didn't remove it. She stood there shaking, tears streaming down her face, the bond blazing gold around her and Wairmu, and she held herself upright with a dignity that no law could grant or remove. "This is exactly the corruption I warned about," Chairman Rengi's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He strode onto the dais, flanked by 4 council members. "Alpha Wairmu, by the authority vested in me by pack law and centuries of tradition, I hereby declare you unfit to lead. Your title is forfeit. Your territory is forfeit. And your son is removed from the line of succession." "You can't do that," Tāmati said, his small voice somehow carrying over the noise. "The pack chooses the alpha, not the council. The pack chose 12 years ago when they accepted your father's leadership," Rengi said coldly. "And the pack trusted him to uphold the laws that keep our society stable. He has violated that trust. He has broken sacred vows. He has placed personal desire above collective good. He has honored his true mate," Tāmati countered. "Which pack law also demands. So which law is more important? The one about honoring bonds or the one about bloodline restrictions?" It was a child's question with devastating implications. Because pack law did contain contradictions. The ancient codes about true mates predated the later editions about bloodline purity and omega limitations. Technically, the mate bond was supposed to supersede all other considerations. But that only applied when it was convenient. When the mates in question were socially acceptable. When honoring the bond didn't threaten the power structure. Rengi's eyes narrowed. "The council interprets pack law. And our interpretation is clear. Wairmu has committed treason by attempting to crown an omega with forbidden bloodline. The penalty is exile or execution." Aroha lifted her head at that. "No," she said hoarsely. "Not execution. He's still the father of my son." "Your former son," Rengi corrected. "The council will appoint a new heir from the eligible bloodlines. Someone without this contamination. Try it, Tāmati said quietly. Touch me. Try to remove me from my inheritance. And see what happens. Something in his voice made even Rengi pause. Because Tāmati wasn't just a child anymore. In the last 5 minutes, something had shifted in him. The weight of future leadership had settled onto his shoulders, premature but undeniable. He radiated authority that transcended age, a bone-deep certainty about his own power. He was becoming alpha, right there, years before his first shift, years before it should have been possible, but crisis forced evolution. And this child had decided he was ready to fight. Back down, boy, Rengi said. You don't have the strength to challenge the council. I have the pack, Tāmati said. He turned to face the assembly. Who supports my father's choice to honor his true mate? Silence. Terrified, calcifying silence. Because supporting Wiremu meant opposing the council. Meant risking your own position. Meant choosing chaos over stability. Truth over comfort. Then a voice from the back shouted, I do. Heads turned. It was Miriama, the head of the warrior division. 30 years of service. Scars from a dozen battles. Unquestionable loyalty to the pack. She walked to the front, her boots heavy on the stone floor, and knelt at the base of the dais. I support Alpha Wiremu. And I support his son's courage. Another voice. As do I. Hemi, the chief hunter. Then another. And I. Rawiri, master of the guard. One by one, pack members moved forward. Not all of them. Maybe not even half. But enough. Enough to show that Wiremu's choice wasn't universally condemned. Enough to prove that some wolves valued authentic bonds over political convenience. Rengi's face went purple. You're all committing treason. No, Miriama said calmly. We're remembering what pack bonds actually mean. We've all felt that pull toward our mates. That recognition that bypasses logic and law. And we've watched Alpha Wiremu suffer for 3 years, trying to do his duty while his soul screamed for its other half. She looked at Kiri, who still stood frozen with the crown crooked on her head. I don't care about her bloodline. I care that she's his true mate. And pack law about honoring mate bonds is older than any restrictions the council added later. It was a scholar's argument delivered by a warrior. The kind of point that couldn't be easily dismissed. Rengi opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the council members flanking him, saw uncertainty in their eyes. The challenge wasn't going as cleanly as planned. If they tried to remove Wiremu by force now, they'd trigger civil war. Pack was too divided. The supporters too numerous and too positioned in key leadership roles. This isn't over, Rengi said finally. The council will reconvene and issue an official ruling. Until then, all ceremonies are suspended. Wiremu, you will confine yourself to your private chambers. Kiri, you will return to the servant quarters. And Tāmati, you will report to council headquarters for evaluation. No, Wiremu said flatly. You dare refuse a council directive. I dare protect my family, Wiremu said. Kiri stays with me. Tāmati stays with me. And we will not be separated while you plot our exile. Then you will all be removed together, Rengi snapped. He gestured to the guards. Take them. The guards didn't move. They looked at each other, at Miriama who commanded them, at Wiremu who was still technically their alpha, at the divided pack that might erupt into violence depending on whose orders they followed. Sir, the lead guard said carefully to Rengi. Respectfully, we need clarification on authority. Alpha Wiremu hasn't been formally removed. Until the council issues an official ruling. I'm issuing it now, Rengi roared. It requires a full council vote, Miriama said calmly. Pack Law Statute 19. You need at least 4 of the 7 council members to agree to alpha removal. Do you have the votes, Chairman? Rengi's expression was answer enough. The council was split. Some members genuinely believed in Wiremu's reforms and wouldn't support removing him over a mate bond. Others were opportunistic enough to use this crisis but not committed enough to stake their positions on it yet. 24 hours, Rengi said through gritted teeth. We reconvene tomorrow at dawn. The full council will vote. And when you lose, Wyrmu, you will accept exile with grace. If you resist, we will invoke the blood oath you swore when you became Alpha. You remember that oath. To place pack welfare above personal desire. To uphold all laws and traditions. To accept council judgment without question. Oh, that was clever. The blood oath was magically binding. If Wyrmu tried to violate it, the magic would kill him. And he'd sworn to accept council judgment. But he'd also sworn to protect his pack from threats both external and internal. And he'd sworn to honor the sacred bonds that held wolf society together. The oath was intentionally vague in places, designed to give alphas flexibility in crisis situations. Which meant Rengi's interpretation wasn't automatically correct. I remember my oath, Wyrmu said quietly. Every word. And I'm honoring it by refusing to pretend my mate bond doesn't exist. By showing my son that truth matters more than political convenience. By demonstrating to the pack that our laws should serve us, not enslave us to outdated restrictions. Tomorrow dawn, Rengi repeated. We will settle this properly. He swept out of the grand hall, council members trailing behind. Half the assembly followed him, those who valued tradition and order above the messy complications of true bonds. The other half remained, clustering around the dais, around Wyrmu and Kiri and Tāmati, forming a protective circle. Aroha still knelt on the dais floor, her elaborate coronation gown pooling around her like blood. She looked up at her husband, her former husband effectively, and her son, and the Omega girl wearing the crown that should have been hers. I hope it was worth it, she said softly. I hope she's worth losing everything. Wyrmu knelt beside her. Aroha, you deserved better than this. You deserved a true mate, not a political arrangement. You deserved to feel that bond, that certainty. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that. But continuing to lie wasn't fair to either of us. You're still leaving me, she said. In front of the entire pack. Humiliating me. Destroying our family. I'm freeing you, Wyrmu said. To find your own true mate. To build a life based on real connection, not duty. I'm 40 years old, Aroha said bitterly. My mate bonding years are over. Whatever chance I had at finding my true match is gone. You stole that from me when we made this political arrangement. And now you're stealing my position, my status, my son. Not your son, Tāmati said. He knelt beside his mother, taking her hand. I'm still your son, Mama. That doesn't change. Papa finding his true mate doesn't erase 13 years of you raising me, teaching me, loving me. Aroha pulled her hand away. Don't patronize me, child. You made your choice. You chose his truth over my dignity. I chose a future where people don't have to choose, Tāmati said. Where pack bonds and political alliances don't have to conflict. Where omegas aren't forbidden from loving alphas. Where bloodlines don't determine worth. You chose fairy tales over reality, Aroha said. She stood, her gown rustling. And reality will crush you. The council will vote for exile. The northern territories will invade when they sense weakness. The pack will split into factions. And you'll realize that sometimes, comfortable lies keep more people safe than uncomfortable truths. She descended the dais steps with perfect posture, her head high, the uncrowned Luna leaving in dignity if not triumph. Pack members parted to let her pass. Some bowed. Others looked away. Everyone felt the tragedy of it. A woman who'd done everything right by pack standards, who'd served faithfully for 13 years, being cast aside because fate had decreed someone else. It wasn't fair. It wasn't just. But it was true. Kiri reached up with shaking hands and removed the crown from her head. I can't wear this, she whispered. I'm nobody. I'm forbidden bloodline. I'm my mate, Wyrmu said firmly. He took the crown from her hands and set it carefully on the dais floor. And whether you wear that crown or not doesn't change what you are to me. What you've always been. The council will exile us tomorrow, Kiri said. All of us. Will lose everything. Your son will lose his inheritance. And it's my fault. If I'd just stayed away, then I would have died inside, Wiremu said. Slowly, quietly, respectably. Is that what you wanted? For both of us to live half-lives pretending we didn't recognize each other. I wanted, Kiri's voice broke. I wanted not to destroy your family. You didn't destroy it, Tāmati said. It was already broken. You're just the reason we're finally admitting it. The remaining pack members began filing out of the Grand Hall, returning to their homes to process what they'd witnessed. Some stopped to offer support to Wiremu. Others left silently, their allegiances unclear. By the time the last wolves departed, only Wiremu, Kiri, Tāmati, and Miriama remained. You need to prepare for tomorrow, Miriama said bluntly. Rangi will have spent all night securing votes. He'll offer positions, make threats, call in favors. He wants you gone, Wiremu. You've been too progressive, too willing to challenge old structures. This mate bond situation just gave him the excuse he needed. What are our options? Irmu asked. Legally. Limited. The blood oath complicates things. If the council votes for exile and you refuse, the magic could kill you. Miriama paused. But there are older laws. Pre-council laws. Back when packs were governed by the wolves themselves, not appointed administrators. Trial by challenge, Wiremu said slowly. Exactly. If you challenge the council's authority before they vote, you can invoke the ancient right of pack judgment. Put it to the wolves directly. Let them decide through traditional challenge rituals whether you deserve to remain alpha. That's a bloodbath waiting to happen, Wiremu said. Challenge rituals mean combat. Against anyone who opposes my choice. I could end up fighting dozens of pack members. Or, Miriama said carefully, your supporters could fight on your behalf. The warriors. The hunters. Those of us who believe in what you're trying to do. That's civil war. The council's vote is already civil war, Miriama said. This way at least it's structured, controlled. And the outcome has legitimacy because it's rooted in the oldest pack traditions. Older than bloodline restrictions. Older than Omega limitations. Older than councils. Wiremu looked at Kiri, who'd gone very pale. If I invoke trial by challenge, you'll be at the center of it. Every wolf who fights will be fighting over whether you belong at my side. Whether our bond is legitimate. Can you handle that? I don't know, Kiri whispered honestly. But I know I can't handle watching you give up. Watching you accept exile because the council decided our bond is inconvenient. So if we have to fight, we fight. I won't let you fight, Wiremu said immediately. I'm not asking permission, Kiri said, and there was unexpected steel in her voice. I'm Omega, but I'm not helpless. And this is my future too. You don't get to protect me by sacrificing yourself. Tāmati had been silent, listening to the adult's plan. Now he spoke up. What if we didn't fight? The council isn't going to change their minds out of kindness, Miriama said gently. No, I mean what if we left? Tāmati looked at his father. What if we accepted exile but on our own terms? Found a new territory. Started a new pack with different rules. Let the wolves who believe in us come with us. And let the traditionalists stay here with the council. That's abandonment, Wiremu said. I swore to protect these territories. These people. I can't just walk away. Even if staying means dying. Tāmati asked. Because that's what will happen, Papa. Either the blood oath will kill you for refusing the council's judgment, or you'll die fighting dozens of challengers, or you'll live in exile without your pack and die inside. There's no scenario where you stay here and survive. The brutal honesty from a 7-year-old's mouth was devastating. He's right, Kiri said quietly. Wiremu, I know you're alpha. I know you feel responsible for every wolf in these territories. But you can't save people who don't want to be saved. The ones who support the Council's restrictions. They'll never accept our bond. They'll never accept the changes you're trying to make. And forcing them to accept it through combat or political maneuvering will just breed resentment. But the ones who do support us, Miriama added, would follow you anywhere. Build something new with you. We could establish a sanctuary territory for bonded pairs that don't fit traditional categories. For omegas with forbidden bloodlines. For alphas and betas who want a different kind of pack structure. It was sedition. Beautiful, terrifying sedition. The Council would see that as an act of war, Wyrmu said. The Council already sees you as an enemy, Miriama said. The question is whether you fight on their terms or yours. Wyrmu walked to the Grand Hall's massive windows, looking out over the territories he'd governed for 12 years. The mountains where his pack hunted. The valleys where children played. The rivers where they held ceremonies. All of it earned through blood and sacrifice and compromise. All of it conditional on his obedience. If we leave, we'll need resources, he said finally. Territory. Shelter. Protection while we establish ourselves. I have contacts in the western regions, Miriama said. Unclaimed territories near the coast. Harsh land but defensible. We could build there. How many would come with us? Wyrmu asked. Honestly, maybe 50. Maybe 100. The warriors definitely. Some of the hunters. Younger pack members who are frustrated with the old restrictions. Omegas who felt marginalized. But most will stay. They'll choose stability over uncertainty. Even if stability means living under the Council's thumb. 50 wolves. Out of 300. It was a devastating loss. But maybe it was an honest one. Maybe forcing everyone to stay together under laws that half of them resented was worse than splitting into groups based on actual values. We have until dawn, Wyrmu said. Spread the word quietly. Anyone who wants to join us in founding a new pack, tell them to meet at the northern border by sunrise. We'll leave before the Council can vote. Before they can invoke the blood oath. Before they can force confrontation. They'll call you a coward, Miriama warned. A deserter. Let them, Wyrmu said. I'd rather be a living coward building something new than a dead hero defending something broken. He turned to Kiri, who still stood on the dais, looking small and overwhelmed. Last chance to change your mind, he said gently. You could stay here. Resume your position as a servant. Live quietly. The Council wouldn't punish you if I'm gone. Stop, Kiri said, and her voice was stronger than anyone expected. Stop trying to give me an escape. I don't want safety without you. I don't want to live quietly pretending I never felt this bond. If you're building something new, I'm building it with you. That's not negotiable. Tāmati smiled. See, Papa. Even omegas can be stubborn alphas when they need to be. Despite everything, Wyrmu laughed. It was brief and raw but genuine. All right. Then we prepare. Miriama, gather who you can trust. Tell them to pack light. Only essentials. We move fast and we don't look back. The warrior nodded and slipped out of the grand hall, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. Wyrmu, Kiri, and Tāmati stood alone on the dais, surrounded by the symbols of power that no longer meant what they once did. The crown lay discarded on the floor. The ceremonial banners hung limply from the rafters. The throne itself seemed smaller somehow, less significant. Papa, Tāmati said quietly. What happens to Mama? It was the question Wyrmu had been avoiding. She stays. She'll likely remain in a position of honor. The Council won't punish her for my choices. And maybe she'll find what we have. Her own true mate. Her own certainty. Do you think she hates us? Tāmati asked. Right now. Probably, Wyrmu said honestly. But hate born from hurt can heal. Hate born from injustice festers forever. I'd rather she hate me for leaving than hate herself for staying in a false bond. They left the grand hall through the servants' entrance, avoiding the main corridors where pack members might still be lingering. Kiri led them through passages she knew from years of invisible service, the routes where Omegas moved unseen, keeping the pack running from the shadows. In the darkness of those narrow hallways, Wiremu realized how much of pack life he'd never witnessed. How much happened in the margins, performed by wolves considered beneath notice. Kiri navigated with confidence through spaces he'd never even known existed. Storage rooms, service corridors, hidden staircases that let servants move between floors without disrupting the noble families. "How long have you been watching me?" he asked quietly as they climbed a spiral staircase that smelled of stone and lamp oil. "Since the first day," Kiri admitted. "I tried not to, but you were kind. To the servants. You learned our names. You asked about our families. Most alphas look through us like we're furniture. But you saw us as people. That's basic decency," Wiremu said. "Not in our world," Kiri said. "In our world, that's revolution." They reached Wiremu's private chambers, not the ones he shared with Aroha, but his study, where he worked late into the night on territory management and pack business. Tāmati had been here 1,000 times, playing on the floor while his father handled correspondence. But for Kiri, stepping into the Alpha's private space was surreal. "Pack what matters," Wiremu said, moving to his desk. "Documents. Anything that proves our legal claim to asylum in neutral territories." He pulled open drawers, gathering papers and scrolls. The treaty agreements with neighboring packs. The bloodline records that proved his lineage. The correspondence with Western Territory leaders who'd expressed interest in his progressive policies. Tāmati went to the bookshelf and selected volumes carefully. Not the heavy legal texts, but the story collections, the histories, the philosophical treatises about pack bonds and true mates. The knowledge they'd need to build something different. Kiri stood in the center of the room, uncertain. She'd never been told to pack alpha belongings. She didn't know what mattered in this new context where she wasn't a servant but a, what? Partner. Mate. Future Luna of a pack that didn't exist yet. "The blade," Wiremu said, gesturing to a ceremonial knife mounted on the wall. "That was my father's. And his father's before him. 7 generations of alphas. Take it." Kiri reached up with trembling hands and lifted the blade from its mounting. It was heavy, silver-etched, the handle wrapped in traditional weaving. A weapon and a symbol. "I can't take this," she whispered. "This is heritage. This is yours now," Wiremu said firmly. "Because you're part of my lineage. Part of my future. And if we're building a new pack, we bring our history with us. The good parts. The parts worth keeping." A knock at the door made them all freeze. Wiremu moved in front of Kiri instinctively, protective. "Who is it?" "Miriama. With news." He opened the door. The warrior slipped inside, her expression grim. "Word is spreading faster than expected," she said. "The council knows you're planning something. Rengi has stationed guards at all border crossings. He's invoked emergency protocols. No one leaves the territory without council approval until after the dawn vote." "We're trapped," Kiri said. "Not trapped," Miriama corrected. "Contained. There's a difference. Guards are watching the official crossings, but there are dozens of unofficial routes through the mountains. Hunting trails. Service path. I've used them for years during patrols. How many have agreed to come?" Irmu asked. 43 confirmed. Another 20 considering. Most are afraid, Wiremu. They want to support you, but leaving means abandoning their homes, their extended families, everything they know. "I understand," Wiremu said. "Tell them no one is obligated to follow. This is a choice, not a command. They need to see you believe it's worth it," Miriama said bluntly. "They need to see you're not running away in shame but walking toward something better. Right now, you look like a defeated alpha sneaking out in the night." She was right. If Wiremu left like a fugitive, he'd carry that shame forever. And worse, the wolves who followed him would carry it too. They'd always wonder if they'd made the right choice, if they'd abandoned their real pack for a fantasy. "Then we don't sneak," Wiremu said slowly. "We make a statement. The council will stop you," Miriama warned. Let them try, Wairumu said. He looked at Tāmati. How do you feel about one more public appearance? The child's eyes widened, then narrowed with determination. What do you need me to do? Be honest, Wairumu said. Be exactly who you were in the Grand Hall. The heir who values truth over tradition. The next generation refusing to inherit broken systems. 20 minutes later, they stood in the main courtyard of the pack complex, the central gathering space where announcements were made and justice was dispensed. Word had spread through mysterious pack channels, that silent communication network where information traveled faster than any official messenger could run. Wolves gathered in the darkness, maybe 200 of them, curious and nervous. The council hadn't arrived yet, but they would. This kind of gathering didn't go unnoticed. Wairumu stood on the stone platform in the courtyard's center, Kiri at his right side, Tāmati at his left. No crown. No ceremonial robes. Just an alpha, his mate, and his son, illuminated by torchlight. I'm not here to argue with the council, Wairumu called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I'm not here to justify my bond or defend my choices. I'm here to offer an invitation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tomorrow, the council will vote to exile me for honoring my true mate. They will call it treason. They will say I've violated pack law and tradition. And technically they're right. I have violated the laws that forbid omegas with certain bloodlines from bonding with ruling alphas. I have broken the traditions that prioritize political alliances over true mate connections. He paused, letting that sink in. But I haven't violated the oldest pack law. The sacred one. The one that says mate bonds are divine gifts that must be honored above all else. That law predates councils and politics and bloodline restrictions. And I'm choosing to follow it, even though it costs me everything I've built here. Someone in the crowd shouted. What about us? What about the pack you swore to protect? I'm not abandoning you, Wairumu said. I'm offering you a choice. Stay here under council rule with all the security and structure that provides. Or come with me to build something different. A pack where bonds matter more than bloodlines. Where omegas aren't considered lesser. Where true mates can claim each other regardless of social position. You're talking about chaos, another voice called. Without structure, without hierarchy, packs fall apart. I'm talking about different structure, Wairumu corrected. One based on actual bonds instead of inherited privilege. One where leadership is earned through wisdom and service, not just birthright. Yes, it's risky. Yes, it's untested. But so was every innovation that ever improved pack life. Kiri stepped forward, and the crowd went silent. An omega speaking in public gathering spaces wasn't forbidden exactly, but it was uncommon enough to be shocking. I know what you're thinking, she said, her voice shaking but clear. You're thinking I'm the problem. That if I'd just known my place, none of this would be happening. That I seduced the alpha away from his proper Luna. That I'm destroying pack stability for selfish reasons. No one contradicted her because many were thinking exactly that. But I didn't choose this bond, Kiri continued. Neither did Wairumu. We both tried to ignore it for 3 years. We both attempted to do the honorable thing, to prioritize duty over personal feelings. And it nearly killed us both. I watched him grow hollow, watched the light fade from his eyes as he forced himself to pretend I didn't exist. And her voice broke. I cried myself to sleep every night feeling that bond pull at my chest, knowing I could never answer it. She looked at the assembled wolves with sudden fierceness. So yes, I'm Omega. Yes, my bloodline is forbidden. But my bond with Wairumu is real. Sacred. And if your laws say sacred bonds are less important than social hierarchy, then your laws are wrong. Aroha's voice cut through the night like a blade. And what about the bonds already established? The families already built? Do they mean nothing? She stood at the edge of the crowd, still in her coronation gown, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. She looked simultaneously broken and furious. My bond with you was never real, Wairumu said gently but firmly. You know that, Aroha. We both know it. We did our duty. We produced an heir. We maintained political alliance. But we never had what I have with Kiri. We never felt that soul-deep recognition. So 13 years mean nothing? Aroha demanded. 13 years of partnership, of raising a child together, of managing territory crises side by side? That's worthless because it wasn't magical destiny. It's not worthless, Wiremu said. It's just not the same thing. You deserve to feel what I feel with Kiri. You deserve a mate who recognizes you instantly, whose wolf calls to yours, who completes you in ways I never could. And staying in our false bond was preventing you from finding that. Don't pretend you're doing this for me, Aroha spat. You're doing this for yourself, for your precious Omega. And you're justifying it by claiming I'll benefit somehow from being publicly humiliated and abandoned. You're right, Wiremu said, and the admission shocked everyone, including Aroha. I am doing this for myself, for Kiri, for Tāmati, for the future I want to build. And yes, that comes at your expense. Sorry. Truly am. But I won't apologize for choosing truth over comfortable lies anymore. Tāmati moved forward then, standing between his parents. Mama, come with us. Aroha looked at her son like he'd grown a second head. What? Come with us, Tāmati repeated. You don't have to stay here with the council. You don't have to defend a bond that never existed. Come build something new where maybe you'll find your own true mate. I'm 40 years old, Aroha said harshly. Too old for mate bonds and new beginnings. You're lying, Tāmati said with devastating simplicity. You're scared. But you're not too old. For a moment, Aroha's carefully controlled facade cracked completely. She looked at her son, at her former husband, at the Omega girl who'd somehow become the catalyst for everything falling apart. And something like longing flickered across her face. Then Chairman Rengi arrived with a full council and 24 guards. This unauthorized gathering is dissolved, Rengi announced. Return to your homes immediately. Alpha Wiremu, you are confined to quarters pending tomorrow's vote. Anyone who defies this order will be arrested for sedition. Under whose authority? Miriama called out, stepping onto the platform beside Wiremu. Council authority, Rengi said. As granted by pack law. Pack law written by councils to preserve council power, Miriama said. How convenient. But Alpha Wiremu has invoked older law. The law of true mate bonds, which supersedes council jurisdiction. There is no precedent for that interpretation, one of the council members said. There's precedent in every historical text about pack formation, Miriama countered. Before councils existed, packs were formed around bonded pairs. The Alpha Luna bond was the foundation everything else was built on. You can't have pack law without first honoring the bonds that create packs. It was a legal argument that would normally take hours of scholarly debate to resolve. But Rengi had no interest in debate. Guards, take them, he ordered. The guards moved forward reluctantly. They didn't want to arrest their alpha. But they also didn't want to disobey the council and risk their own positions. Then something extraordinary happened. Wolves from the crowd stepped onto the platform. Not attacking. Not threatening. Just standing beside Wiremu and Kiri and Tāmati. Creating a physical barrier between them and the guards. First 10 wolves. Then 20. Then 50. You'll have to arrest all of us, Hemi the chief hunter said calmly. Rengi's face went apoplectic. This is treason. Mass treason. You're all exiled. Every single one of you. Perfect, Wiremu said. Then we accept exile. All of us. We'll leave the territories tonight. Peacefully. No violence. No challenge. We simply go. You can't take pack resources, Rengi said quickly. No weapons. No supplies. No territory maps. You leave with nothing but the clothes on your backs. Agreed, Wiremu said, though it was a devastating concession. Starting a new pack with nothing would be nearly impossible. But if they tried to fight for resources, people would die. And you forfeit all claims to bloodline inheritance, Rengi added. Your son loses his position as heir. Your lineage is stricken from pack records. You become nothing. Tāmati stepped forward, and even at 7 years old, he radiated authority that made grown wolves step back. My lineage isn't defined by your records, he said quietly. My worth isn't determined by council approval. And my future isn't limited to the throne you're so desperate to control. So yes, Chairman Rengi, strike my name from your precious records. I'll build my own legacy. Silence fell across the courtyard, because everyone recognized that in this moment, the child had just demonstrated more alpha presence than most adult leaders ever achieved. He wasn't cowering or begging. He was calmly, definitively choosing his path regardless of consequences. He was exactly what the next generation of alphas should be. Dawn, Rengi said finally. You have until dawn to cross the border. After that, you're enemy combatants and will be treated as such. Guards, escort them to the northern pass and ensure they leave. It was both a victory and a defeat. They were free to go, but stripped of everything that would help them survive. They'd have to build from absolute nothing in harsh territory with winter approaching. But they'd be together. And they'd be honest. The wolves who'd stood on the platform, 53 of them total, began walking toward the northern border. Some stopped briefly at their homes to grab supplies, though they knew the council would likely confiscate most of it. Others said hurried goodbyes to family members who chose to stay behind. Aroha stood frozen in the courtyard, watching the procession, watching her son walk away beside his father and the Omega girl, watching half a decade of careful political work dissolve in a single night. Mama, Tāmati called back. Last chance. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked in the opposite direction, back toward the main house where her chambers waited, where her title as former Luna would protect her from council punishment, where she could maintain her dignity and position even if she'd lost everything else. Wiremu watched her go, feeling the weight of what they'd been and what they'd failed to become. Then he took Kiri's hand and kept walking. The journey to the northern border took 3 hours on foot. The guards followed at a distance, ensuring no one turned back, no one tried to take unauthorized supplies. It was less an escort and more a herding, pushing them toward exile with silent efficiency. At the border marker, a stone cairn that had stood for 3 centuries marking the edge of Wangari territory, the guards stopped. Beyond this point you're no longer pack, the lead guard said. He looked genuinely sad about it. You're exiled. Non-entities. If you return, we're ordered to kill you on sight. Understood, Wiremu said. He placed his hand on the cairn, feeling the centuries of pack history embedded in the stone. All the alphas before him who'd defended this border. All the wolves who'd lived and died protecting these territories. He was walking away from all of it. Then he felt Kiri's hand slip into his, her fingers warm despite the cold night air. Felt Tāmati press against his other side. Felt the 53 wolves who'd chosen truth over security gather behind him. And realized he wasn't walking away from pack. He was walking toward a new one. They crossed the border as the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky. The moment they stepped beyond the cairn, something shifted, severing. The magical connection that had bound them to Wangari territory, that had defined their pack identity for their entire lives, snapped like a cut rope. Several wolves gasped at the sensation. One woman fell to her knees, crying. Because losing pack connection was like losing a limb, a phantom ache where belonging used to live. I know it hurts, Wiremu said, addressing the 53 exiles. I know you feel untethered. But we're not alone. We're together. And we're going to build something better than what we left behind. With what resources? Someone called out. We have no food, no shelter, no weapons beyond what we carried. Winter is 6 weeks away. How do we survive? The same way our ancestors survived, Miriama said. We hunt. We build. We fight for every inch of survival until we're strong enough to thrive. Our ancestors had established territories, the same voice argued. Had alliances. Had infrastructure. We have nothing. We have each other, Kiri said quietly. Her voice shouldn't have carried over the growing panic, but somehow it did. We have truth. We have genuine bonds instead of political arrangements. And we have the freedom to build exactly what we need instead of maintaining what we inherited. The Omega speaks wisdom, an elder wolf said. Marama, one of the healers who joined the Exodus. I've spent 40 years watching wolves suffer under bonds that weren't real, watching Omegas hide their lights, watching potential destroyed by bloodline restrictions. If we're starting fresh, we can fix all of it. Or we can die in these mountains before winter hits, the dissenting voice said. I'm not sure optimism keeps us warm. Neither does cynicism, Wiremu said firmly. But you're right that we need a plan. Miriama, what's the nearest unclaimed territory? About 30 kilometers west, Miriama said, pulling out a map she'd somehow smuggled past the guards. Coastal region called Tāmati. Rocky territory, harsh weather but defensible. And there's an abandoned settlement from the old wars. Buildings might still be partially intact. Then that's where we go, Wiremu said. We move fast, we move together, and we don't stop until we reach shelter. They walked through the dawn, 53 exiles carrying nothing but hope and determination. Children rode on adults' shoulders. The elderly were supported by the young. No one complained. Because complaining required energy they couldn't spare. The sun rose fully, revealing the harsh beauty of the landscape they'd entered. Mountains carved by ancient glaciers. Forests that had never been logged. Rivers that ran wild and untamed. Territory that didn't belong to any pack. Territory waiting for someone brave enough to claim it. Around midday, they heard howls behind them. Not friendly greetings. Hunting calls. Pursuit. The council sent trackers, Miriama said grimly. They're not letting us go peacefully after all. I thought we had until we crossed the border, Kiri said. We did, Wiremu said. But clearly Rengi decided exile wasn't enough. He wants us eliminated. Can't risk us building something that challenges his authority. How many? Tāmati asked. His voice unnaturally calm for a 7-year-old facing danger. Sounds like a hunting pack, Miriama said. Maybe 20 wolves. Professional trackers. They'll catch up within the hour at our current pace. Then we split up, Wiremu said. Some of us run ahead with the children and elderly. The rest stay back and slow the pursuit. That's suicide, someone said. It's strategy, Miriama corrected. Small group can move faster than large group. If half of us engage the trackers in running combat, nothing direct, just harassment and delay, the others gain time to reach Tāmati. I'll stay, Wiremu said immediately. No, Kiri said just as quickly. You're the alpha. You're the one who needs to reach the new territory and establish our claim. I'll stay. Absolutely not, Wiremu said. Your mate, Kiri interrupted. Not your property. Not your responsibility to protect at the cost of everyone else. If trackers catch the main group because you stayed behind, we all die. But if I stay with the warriors and buy you time, at least the children survive. It was brutal logic that Wiremu couldn't argue against. I'll stay too, Tāmati said. No, both parents said simultaneously. I'm the heir, Tāmati said stubbornly. Maybe not to Wangariai anymore, but to whatever we build. And heirs fight for their people. You taught me that, Papa. You're 7 years old, Wiremu said desperately. You haven't even had your first shift. You can't. I can lead the children forward, Tāmati said. Kids will follow me faster than they'll follow adults they don't know. I'll get them to Tāmati. I promise. He was right again. The child was devastatingly, impossibly right. Wiremu looked at his son, at his mate, at the 53 wolves who trusted him enough to walk into exile. Every decision he made now would determine who lived and who died. Miriama, take 20 warriors and slow the trackers, Wiremu said finally. Use the terrain. Don't engage directly, just delay. Buy us 3 hours. He stopped. because ordering his mate to safety while others fought felt wrong. But sending her into danger felt impossible. Kiri made the decision for him. She kissed him once, fierce and fast, then joined the warriors preparing to face the trackers. 3 hours, she said. Then we catch up. Don't start the good building without us. She shifted then, her clothes shredding as her bones reformed, as fur replaced skin. Her Omega wolf was smaller than the Alpha and Beta warriors around her, russet-colored and quick. But her eyes held the same fierce determination as her human form. 20 wolves shifted and ran back toward the pursuing sounds. 20 warriors buying time with their lives. 33 exiles kept moving forward, running now, Tāmati leading the children with surprising authority, the adults carrying supplies and supporting anyone who struggled. Wiremu ran beside them, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to protect Kiri, to fight beside his warriors. But an alpha's duty was to the pack. And right now, the pack needed him to secure territory, not indulge his need to defend his mate. The hours that followed were agony. They ran through forests and across rocky hillsides, forded streams with water so cold it burned, climbed slopes that left everyone gasping. Behind them occasionally they heard sounds of combat, snarls, the crashing of bodies through underbrush. But they didn't stop. Couldn't stop. They reached Tāmati as the sun began its descent toward evening. The abandoned settlement was exactly what Miriama had described. Partially collapsed buildings made of stone and timber, evidence of pack life that had ended decades ago. But the bones of infrastructure remained. Walls, roofs, defensive positions. It was shelter. Barely. But it was something. Start salvaging, Wiremu ordered. Anything useful. Wood for fires. Fabric for bandages. Water sources. Move fast. We need this place defensible before nightfall. The 33 exiles scattered, working with desperate efficiency. Children gathered kindling. Adults assessed building stability. Everyone focused on immediate survival needs. Tāmati stood at the settlement's edge, facing back the way they'd come, watching for warriors who should have caught up by now. They're not coming, he said quietly. They will, Wiremu said, though his voice lacked conviction. Papa, we both know. They will, Wiremu repeated, harder this time. Because admitting the alternative meant accepting that Kiri and 20 warriors had died buying their escape. Meant accepting that his mate was gone before he'd even gotten to truly claim her. Then, as darkness fell complete, wolves appeared at the settlement's edge. 12 of them. Not 20. Miriama was among them, limping badly, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Kiri was there too, collapsed against another warrior's shoulder, barely conscious but alive. 8 warriors hadn't made it back. The trackers, Miriama gasped as Marama the healer rushed forward. 20 became 50. The council sent reinforcements. They're planning a full assault at dawn. They want us eliminated before we can establish territorial claim. How many did we? Wiremu couldn't finish the question. We killed 6. Wounded maybe a dozen more. But they're organized. Armed with silver. This isn't exile, it's extermination. Wiremu knelt beside Kiri, brushing blood-matted hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with difficulty. Sorry, she whispered. Couldn't. Buy more time. You bought enough, Wiremu said, though his throat was tight. You're alive. That's what matters. The children. Safe. All of them. Because of you. Kiri smiled weakly, then passed out. The night that followed was spent in frantic preparation. They built barricades from rubble. Took watches. Rationed what little food they had. Treated the wounded with supplies scraped together from forest plants and sheer determination. 45 exiles remained now. 33 who'd run ahead, 12 who'd returned from combat. Against 50 trained warriors with silver weapons and council backing. The math wasn't favorable. We can't win a direct fight, Miriama said bluntly as they planned. Best we can hope for is making them pay so dearly for victory that they decide we're not worth the cost. Or, Tāmati said from where he sat near Kiri's sleeping form, we don't fight at all. Surrender, someone said incredulously. Negotiate, Tāmati corrected. What does the council actually want? Us dead? Or us not threatening their power? Both, Wairmu said grimly. No, Tāmati said with surprising certainty. They want us not threatening their power. The killing is just means to that end. So what if we offer them something else? Proof that we're not a threat. Like what? Miriama asked. A blood oath, Tāmati said. Papa, you're still technically bound by the oath you swore as Alpha. Use it. Swear that this new pack will never challenge Wangari territory. Will never recruit from their population. Will never interfere with their governance. Make it magically binding. That's accepting permanent exile, someone protested. Never being able to return home. Never seeing family again. We already accepted that when we crossed the border, Tāmati said. This just makes it official. Legal. Something the council can point to when their pack questions why they're letting us live. It was, once again, devastatingly logical from a child who should have been crying or hiding, not negotiating pack survival. The oath might kill me, Wairmu said slowly. Using blood oath magic wrong can backfire. And I'm not sure I have the authority to swear for a pack that doesn't exist yet. Then we make it exist, Miriama said. Right now. Before dawn. Official pack formation with you as Alpha. Then you have the authority to make binding oaths on the pack's behalf. Pack formation requires rituals, Miriama said. Ceremonies. Time we don't have. Pack formation requires consent, Tāmati corrected. Everything else is tradition. Strip away the ceremony and what remains? An alpha, his mate, and wolves who choose to follow. We have all of that. He was right. Again. As midnight approached, the 45 exiles gathered in the largest of the ruined buildings. No ceremonial robes. No sacred spaces. No council oversight. Just wolves who'd chosen truth over comfort. Standing together in the darkness. I claim Alpha authority over this pack, Wairmu said formally. Do you accept? Yes, 44 voices said in unison. Even the children. Even the wounded. I name this pack Tāmati, the fishhook, because we're small but we're strong and we hold on when others would let go. Someone laughed. Someone else cried. It was the kind of name that reflected both hope and reality. And I claim Kiri as my Luna, my mate, my equal in leadership. Do you accept? Another chorus of agreement. Kiri, barely conscious, managed to nod. Then we're pack, Wairmu said simply. Bound not by territory or tradition, but by choice. By truth. By the commitment to build something better than what we left behind. The moment the words finished, something shifted in the air. A new bond, fragile but real, connecting all 45 wolves. Not as strong as the connection they'd lost when they crossed the border, but genuine, growing. Tāmati smiled. Now you have authority. Now you can make oaths that will bind. At dawn, 50 warriors arrived at the settlement's perimeter, silver weapons gleaming in the early light. But instead of assault, they found Wairmu standing alone at the barricade. I invoke parley, he called out. Under ancient law, I have the right to negotiate before combat. The warrior at the front, one of Rangi's personal guards, hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. The council's orders are elimination, not negotiation. The council's orders violate the law of parley, Wairmu countered. Unless they want every pack in the region to know they ignored sacred protocols. Do you really want to give them that reputation? Uncertainty flickered across faces. Because Wairmu was right. Violating parley laws would make Wangari territory look barbaric. Other packs would question whether they could be trusted in any negotiation. 1 hour, the guard captain said finally. Send a messenger back to the council. Get authorization for terms. That hour became 2. Then 4. The sun climbed higher while warriors waited on both sides, weapons ready but not raised. Finally, a runner arrived from Wangari territory. Not Rengi, but one of the younger council members. Heir, who'd always been more moderate, more willing to consider Wyrmu's reforms. She approached the barricade alone. "The council has authorized me to hear your terms." "Blood oath," Wyrmu said without preamble. "I swear on my life and my pack's life that Tāmati pack will never attempt to reclaim Wangari territory. Will never recruit from your population. Will never interfere with your governance. Will never challenge your authority. We will exist as completely separate entities, maintaining neutral borders and honoring territorial agreements." Heir studied him carefully. "In exchange for, you leave us alone. No further attacks. No harassment. No attempts to eliminate us. We accept permanent exile. We accept loss of all rights to Wangari resources and bloodline privileges. But we get to live. To build. To exist." Heir glanced back at the 50 warriors, calculating. "The council fears you'll become a threat. That other dissatisfied pack members will join you. That your progressive ideas will undermine our structure. Then write it into the oath," Wyrmu said. "Make it magically binding that we cannot accept refugees from Wangari. That any wolf who leaves your territory to join ours does so at risk of permanent exile from both packs. Make the separation absolute." It was a harsh term. It meant families split by this exodus would never reunite. Meant anyone who regretted staying couldn't change their mind later. But it also gave the council exactly what they wanted. Proof that Tāmati pack posed no threat. Heir considered for a long moment. "I'll take your terms to the council. But Wyrmu, you understand what you're offering. You're condemning your pack to permanent isolation. No alliances. No trade. No support if you face external threats." "I understand," Wyrmu said. "We'll stand alone. But we'll stand honest." Heir left. The warriors remained, weapons ready but not attacking. Hours passed in tense silence while the council deliberated. Inside the settlement, the 45 exiles waited. Kiri had regained consciousness, though she remained weak from blood loss. Tāmati sat beside her, holding her hand with the fierce protectiveness of a child who'd already lost too much. "Do you think they'll accept?" Kiri asked Wyrmu quietly. "I think they'll calculate whether killing us is worth the diplomatic cost," Wyrmu said honestly. "If other territories start asking questions, if our deaths make Rengi look tyrannical instead of protective, the council loses more than they gain. And if they decide we're worth killing anyway, then we fight," Wyrmu said simply. "And we make them remember us." Kiri smiled weakly. "I never imagined this. Being Luna. Leading a pack. I spent my whole life being told Omegas like me were worthless. That forbidden bloodlines meant I'd never amount to anything. And now you're the most important person in Tāmati pack," Wyrmu said. "Because you represent what we're fighting for. The right to exist despite bloodline restrictions. The right to claim true bonds regardless of social position. The right to be seen as worthy." "No pressure then," Kiri said, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. Tāmati squeezed her hand. "You're going to be the best Luna the territories have ever seen. 'Cause you remember what it's like to be invisible. So you'll make sure no one in our pack ever feels that way." "When did you get so wise?" Kiri asked the child. "When I watched my parents suffer for 3 years trying to deny their bond," Tāmati said with heartbreaking honesty. "When I realized adults lie to themselves more than children do. When I decided I wanted to be the kind of alpha who chooses truth even when it's hard." Before anyone could respond, Heir returned. Her expression was carefully neutral as she approached the barricade. "The council accepts your terms with one modification," she said. "The blood oath must include your son. Tāmati must also swear never to claim Wangari territory, never to challenge for the alpha position he would have inherited. His line must be permanently severed from our succession." It was calculated cruelty. Not just exiling Wiremu but ensuring his son's future was also bound by magical constraint. Making certain Tāmati could never return, never reclaim what should have been his birthright. Wiremu looked at his 7-year-old son, at the child who'd already sacrificed so much. Tāmati, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Tāmati said calmly. He walked to the barricade, standing beside his father with absolute certainty. I swear, on my blood and my future and my life, I will never claim Wangari territory. I will never challenge for the position I would have inherited. My line is severed from their succession permanently. The words hung in the air, and then something shifted, the magic accepting the oath, binding it into reality. Tāmati swayed slightly as the weight of it settled onto him, a 7-year-old carrying vows that would shape the rest of his life. Now you, Heir said to Wiremu. Wiremu drew the ceremonial blade Kiri had taken from his study. 7 generations of alpha authority in silver and greenstone. He cut his palm, letting blood well up, and spoke the words that would bind him and his pack forever. I, Wiremu, Alpha of Tāmati pack, swear on my blood and my life and my pack's existence. We will never attempt to reclaim Wangari territory. We will never recruit from Wangari population. We will never interfere with Wangari governance. We will never challenge Wangari authority. We accept permanent exile, permanent separation, and permanent loss of all rights to Wangari resources and privileges. We will exist as separate entities, maintaining neutral borders and honoring territorial agreements. This I swear, and let the magic bind me to this truth until death releases me. The magic took hold instantly. Wiremu gasped as it locked into place, a collar of obligation that would kill him if he violated any term. But it also did something else. It formalized Tāmati pack's existence, gave them legal standing, made them real in the eyes of ancient law. They were no longer refugees. They were a pack, small, vulnerable, isolated, but legitimate. Heir nodded slowly. The council accepts. You have 24 hours to vacate this settlement. What? Miriama stepped forward. We just spent a day making it defensible. This settlement is within the extended borders of Wangari influence, Heir said. The council is willing to let you live, but not this close to our territory. You move further west, to unclaimed lands beyond the coastal range. Or the oath is void and we resume hostilities. It was another punishment disguised as mercy, making them abandon the only shelter they'd found, forcing them to travel deeper into wilderness with wounded wolves and limited supplies. But they'd survived this long. They'd survive the next challenge too. We'll leave at dawn, Wiremu said. But we take our wounded. And you provide us with basic supplies. Food, medical resources, tools. Not charity. Compensation for the pack resources we left behind when we were exiled. Heir's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating. I'm claiming what's fair, Wiremu said. We built Wangari territory alongside you for generations. My father was Alpha. My grandfather before him. Our bloodlines helped defend those lands, grow those resources, establish those trade routes. We're not asking for luxury. Just enough to give us a fighting chance at survival. The council will never agree to that. Then tell them I'm invoking the law of severed bonds, Wiremu said. When a pack member is exiled, they're entitled to 1 week's worth of resources per year of service. I served as Alpha for 12 years. My warriors who came with me have decades of combined service. Calculate that compensation and deliver it. Or admit that Wangari territory doesn't honor its own laws. Heir's expression shifted to something like respect. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Why should I? Wiremu said. We've already lost everything else. We might as well fight for what we can get. Another delay. Another negotiation. Another runner sent back to the council. The sun reached its peak and began its descent while both sides waited. This time, Chairman Rengi himself arrived. He looked older than Wiremu remembered, his face lined with stress and anger. He stopped at the barricade, studying the ramshackle settlement, the wounded wolves, the child who disrupted the coronation that felt like years ago instead of a single day. "You're a fool, Wiremu," Rengi said without preamble. "You could have had everything. Power, security, prosperity. But you threw it away for an Omega who'll never be accepted by legitimate pack society." "She's accepted by our pack," Wiremu said. "That's the only legitimacy that matters to me." 45 wolves, Rengi said, gesturing to the settlement. "That's what your grand principles are worth. 45 wolves against 300 who chose stability over chaos. Quality over quantity," Miriama interjected. "I'll take 45 wolves who believe in our cause over 300 who follow out of fear or tradition." Rengi ignored her, keeping his eyes on Wiremu. "The council agrees to compensation. 1 week's worth of basic resources per year of service. But understand something. This is the last kindness you'll receive from us. After this, you're truly alone. No trade. No assistance. No mercy if you violate the oath." "Understood," Wiremu said. "We'll collect the resources and leave by dawn." "You'll leave now," Rengi corrected. "The resources will be delivered to the border of Wangarii influence. You take them and keep moving. Every hour you remain is an hour I have to explain to angry pack members why we're not eliminating you entirely." It was the final humiliation, chased away like beggars instead of being allowed even a night's rest. But Wiremu nodded. They were alive. They were recognized. They were free. That was enough. The 45 exiles gathered what little they'd salvaged and began the trek west again. Their wounds were barely treated. Their bodies were exhausted. But they moved with surprising determination, these wolves who'd chosen truth over comfort. At the border of Wangarii influence, true to Rengi's words, supplies waited. Not generous but adequate. Dried meat, medical herbs, basic tools, waterskins. Enough to survive a few weeks if they were careful. Wiremu divided the resources evenly, making sure the wounded and children received extra portions. Then they kept walking, pushing into true wilderness, into territory that no pack had claimed in living memory. 3 days later they found it. A valley nestled between coastal mountains, protected from the worst weather by natural rock formations. A river ran through it, fresh and clear. Forest covered the slopes, rich with game. And at the valley's heart, evidence of ancient habitation, stone foundations from a settlement so old no living wolf remembered its name. "This," Wiremu said, standing at the valley's entrance. "This is where we build." The 45 exiles filed into the valley, and even in their exhaustion, something like wonder crossed their faces. 'Cause it was beautiful. Wild and untamed and dangerous, yes, but beautiful. "We'll call it Te Puna," Marama said quietly. "The spring. Because we're starting fresh." Over the following weeks, Te Puna Pack took shape. They built shelters from fallen timber and stone salvaged from the ancient foundations. They hunted and foraged, learning the valley's rhythms and resources. They established defenses and warning systems. They created governance structures that honored bonds over bloodlines, merit over inheritance. And slowly, impossibly, they began to thrive. Kiri's wounds healed. She stood beside Wiremu as true Luna, not because tradition demanded it but because the pack chose her. She knew every wolf's name, every child's fear, every elder's wisdom. She moved through the settlement like sunlight, bringing warmth to wolves who'd spent their lives in shadows. Tāmati grew into his authority with surprising grace. At 7 years old, he was already mediating disputes, organizing the children's education, asking questions that made adults reconsider their assumptions. He was becoming the alpha he'd promised to be, one who chose truth over tradition, compassion over control. But not everything was peaceful. 6 weeks after they settled Te Puna, scouts reported movement in the surrounding territories. Not Wangarii wolves, someone else. Northern pack members exploring the region, testing boundaries. "They're looking for weakness," Miriama said during the council meeting. "New packs are always targets. If we seem too vulnerable, they'll attack and claim the valley for themselves. We can't win against an established pack, someone said. Not with 45 wolves, half of whom are children or elderly. Then we make them think we're stronger than we are, Wiremu said. Strategic positioning. Defensive advantages. Make attacking us too costly to be worth it. But they all knew the truth. They were vulnerable. And vulnerability attracted predators. The northern pack made contact 3 days later. 10 warriors appeared at the valley entrance, not attacking but clearly assessing. Their leader, a massive alpha named Tain, studied the settlement with calculating eyes. "Te Puna pack," he said, not quite mocking but close. "I've heard rumors. Exiles from Wangari, led by an alpha who threw away his territory for an omega with forbidden bloodline. Fascinating. We're not interested in conflict," Wiremu said carefully. "We're simply claiming unclaimed territory, as is our right under pack law." "Unclaimed because it's barely survivable," Tain said. "Harsh winters, limited resources, isolated from trade routes. You'll be dead before spring unless you have support." "Then we'll die free," Wiremu said. Tain laughed. "Brave words. Stupid but brave. Tell me, Wiremu, what if I offered you a different option?" "What kind of option?" "Alliance. The Northern Territories could use an alpha with your flexible approach to tradition. And you could use our resources, our protection, our trade networks." Tain's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, it would require certain concessions. Recognizing Northern authority. Following Northern governance structures. Allowing us to advise your pack on matters of hierarchy and bloodline management." It was a trap disguised as generosity. Accept and lose their independence. Refuse and face elimination. "We appreciate the offer," Wiremu said carefully. "But we've built Te Puna on principles of autonomy and authentic bonds. We're not interested in external governance." "Even if refusal means your pack doesn't survive the winter?" Tain asked. "Even then." Tain's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. The Northern Territories don't forget insults. And refusing our protection is an insult." "We intend no insult," Wiremu said. "We simply choose independence." "Independence is another word for isolation," Tain said. "And isolated packs don't last long. I'll give you 1 month to reconsider. After that," he shrugged. "Natural selection takes care of the rest." The northern warriors left, but the threat remained. Te Puna pack had survived exile, survived the council's attempts at elimination, survived the brutal work of starting from nothing. But they still faced the fundamental challenge of pack survival. You needed allies or you needed power, and they had neither. That night, Wiremu stood at the valley entrance with Kiri, watching stars emerge above the mountains. Behind them, their settlement glowed with firelight, wolves gathering for the evening meal, children playing in the growing safety of home. "It's not enough, is it?" Kiri said quietly. "Everything we've built. It's still not enough to keep us safe." "It's enough for now," Wiremu said. "And maybe that's all we can ask for. One day at a time. One challenge at a time. What if Tain comes back with an army? Then we fight. And if we lose, at least we lose on our own terms." Kiri leaned against him, and Wiremu felt the bond between them hum with contentment despite the circumstances. This moment. This was what he'd been willing to sacrifice everything for. The ability to stand beside his true mate without lying, without pretending, without denying what they were to each other. "I love you," Kiri said simply. "I know I'm not supposed to say it. I know Omegas are supposed to be grateful and submissive and quiet. But I love you, and I'm not ashamed of it." "Good," Wiremu said, pulling her closer. "Because I love you too. And I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over." Behind them, Tāmati emerged from the settlement, carrying firewood with determination too large for his small frame. He looked at his parents, at the way they stood together without shame or secrecy, and smiled. "Papa," he called. "Marama says dinner's ready." And she's telling the story about how we claimed the valley. The kids are asking if it's really true that I threw the crown away. It's true, Wiremu said. Though technically you placed it on your mother's head first. Because you were being stubborn about it, Tāmati said matter-of-factly. Someone had to make you see sense. A 7-year-old, Kiri said wonderingly. A 7-year-old child had to teach us courage. The next generation always teaches the previous one, Tāmati said with a kind of wisdom that shouldn't fit in such a young voice. That's how packs evolve. That's how we become better than what we were. He headed back to the settlement, leaving his parents standing in the darkness, contemplating the truth of his words. He's going to be extraordinary, Kiri said. He already is, Wiremu said. He's the reason we're here. The reason any of this was possible. They walked back to the settlement together, to the meal waiting, to the pack they'd built against every odd. 45 wolves who'd chosen truth over comfort, who'd walked away from everything familiar to build something authentic. But as they ate and laughed and told stories around the communal fire, as children played and elders shared wisdom and warriors planned tomorrow's hunts, none of them noticed the figure watching from the mountains above. A wolf in human form, standing in the shadows, observing the settlement with calculating interest. Not Northern Pack. Not Wangari. Someone else entirely. Someone who'd heard rumors about an alpha who'd thrown away his throne for an omega. About a child who'd disrupted a coronation. About exiles building something new in the wilderness. Someone who saw opportunity where others saw weakness. The figure turned and disappeared into the darkness, carrying information back to their pack, to leaders who would decide whether Te Puna represented threat or tool, enemy or asset. And in the valley below, 45 wolves celebrated their survival, unaware that their greatest challenges were still ahead. Unaware that the choice Wiremu made in the Grand Hall, the choice Tāmati forced by throwing the crown away, the choice Kiri accepted by standing beside them, those choices had sent ripples across every territory in the region. Other Omegas were watching. Other wolves with forbidden bloodlines. Other pack members trapped in false bonds, suffering under restrictions they'd accepted as unchangeable. They were watching Te Puna Pack. And they were beginning to hope. Which meant the council's worst fear was coming true. Not that Te Puna would attack, but that Te Puna would inspire. Would demonstrate that different was possible. That the old hierarchies weren't inevitable. That bonds mattered more than bloodlines. Revolution didn't always come with violence. Sometimes it came with example. And Te Puna Pack, whether they realized it or not, had just become the most dangerous idea in the territories. Not because of their strength, but because of their truth. In the Grand Hall of Wangari territory, Chairman Rengi received the scouts' report with a face like carved stone. The settlement was growing. The exiles were surviving. Worse, they were thriving. How many now? He asked tersely. 45 still, the scout said. But there's interest. Pack members asking questions. Omegas acting differently. The coronation disruption is becoming legend instead of scandal. Rengi closed his eyes. This was the scenario he'd warned the council about. Not direct threat. Ideological contamination. What do you recommend? Another council member asked. Nothing, Rengi said finally. We do nothing. We upheld the oath. We allowed them to leave. We have no legal grounds to pursue further action. But if they inspire others, then we strengthen our own bonds, Rengi interrupted. We remind our pack why our structures exist, why traditions protect us. We don't attack ideas with violence. We attack ideas with better ideas. But even as he said it, Rengi knew the truth. Te Puna Pack wasn't just an idea. It was proof. Living, breathing proof that alternative structures could work. That Omegas could lead. That forbidden bloodlines didn't doom packs. That authentic bonds mattered more than political arrangements. And proof was harder to fight than theory. In her chambers, Aroha stood at the window, looking north toward mountains she couldn't see but knew were there. Somewhere beyond those peaks, Her son was growing up in exile. Her former husband was building a life with his true mate. And she was here, technically honored but fundamentally alone. The council had offered her continued status as former Luna, had promised her comfort and security and respect. But they couldn't offer her what Wiremu had found with Kiri, that bone-deep recognition, that certainty of belonging. She was 40 years old. Too old for mate bonds, everyone said. Too old for new beginnings. But sometimes late at night she wondered if they were lying. If age was just another restriction designed to keep wolves in their assigned places. Another tradition that protected power structures more than it protected people. She touched the window glass, cold under her fingers, and made a decision that would change everything. But that's a story for another telling. Because right now, in Te Puna Valley, 45 wolves sat around a fire, telling the story of how they claimed their freedom. How a child threw away a crown and placed it on an Omega's head. How an Alpha chose truth over throne. How exiles became founders. And in mountains and valleys across every territory, wolves listened to those stories with growing hunger, with dangerous hope, with the beginning of questions that would shake the foundations of pack society. The revolution had started with a crown thrown away. What it would end with, whether triumph or tragedy, transformation or destruction, remained unwritten. But one thing was certain, the territories would never be the same again. And Te Puna Pack, small and vulnerable and fierce, stood at the center of it all. Proof that different was possible, even when it was dangerous. Even when it cost everything. Especially when it cost everything. Because the most valuable truths always do.